Let's be real for a second. Love isn't simple for everyone. Some people crave closeness, others run from it in avoidance. They're not broken, they're not cold, and they're not incapable of love. But they've learned from life, from pain, from history that love isn't safe. That intimacy equals danger. That vulnerability gets punished. So, if you're trying to love an avoidant, listen closely because I'm about to tell you the only kind of love they will ever trust. They don't want drama. They don't trust intensity, the fireworks, the passion, the I can't live without you energy. That doesn't pull them in, it terrifies them. They've lived lives where love came with strings, expectations, and pain. So what they need isn't intensity, it's consistency. Quiet, solid, dependable consistency. If you're constantly chasing them, texting all day, trying to pry open their walls with your emotional crowbar, stop. They don't open that way. You want to be let in, then stand still. Let your actions speak. Be safe. Be predictable. Be steady. Because that's the only language their nervous system trusts. They're testing you all the time and not in some manipulative game, playing way. They're testing you the same way a burned child checks if the stove is still hot. Are you going to invade their space when they need to breathe? Are you going to guilt them into closeness when they need time? Are you going to turn their need for distance into a personal attack? Because when you show them, not say, show them that your love doesn't suffocate, doesn't demand, doesn't punish, they begin to relax. And that's when trust is born. Let me tell you something. Avoidants don't need you to fix them. They need you to believe them. They need you to understand that their walls aren't about you, they're about survival. But here's the kicker, even avoidants want love deeply. They just don't trust that it can last, that it won't hurt, that they'll still be loved after showing their whole self. So the only kind of love they will ever trust? The kind that gives them space without threat, the kind that's patient without pressure, the kind that says, I'm here, even when you pull away, I don't disappear. This kind of love, it takes courage. It takes self-respect. It takes boundaries. But if you can offer that real, grounded, non-anxious love, they will start to do something extraordinary. They'll let you in, not all at once, not loudly, but surely. And that's where real love begins. Avoidants don't fear love itself. What they truly fear is what love has cost them in the past. For many avoidantly attached individuals, love wasn't something that felt nourishing or safe. It was something that demanded too much, betrayed them, disappointed them, or slowly chipped away at their sense of autonomy. Whether the pain came from emotionally unavailable parents, unpredictable caregivers, or past romantic relationships filled with manipulation or pressure, their nervous system now associates closeness with risk. As a result, they don't move away from love because they don't want it. They move away because they've been conditioned to believe that love will eventually lead to hurt. This fear of cost shows up in subtle, often misunderstood ways. They may be charming one day and distant the next, not because they're playing games, but because their emotional wiring is constantly scanning for signs that their space, independence, or control is being threatened. Closeness, even when healthy, can feel invasive to someone who has never known safe emotional intimacy. They learn to self-soothe, to solve problems on their own, and to stay emotionally distant as a way to survive. So when someone comes in offering love, support, or emotional depth, it can unconsciously trigger alarm bells in their mind, warning them that this connection could cost them their peace, their stability, or worse, their sense of self. This isn't about a lack of empathy or coldness. In fact, many avoidants feel deeply, they just don't express it in the ways most people expect. Their silence isn't always indifference, it's protection. Their need for space isn't rejection, it's regulation. They are constantly balancing between craving connection and fearing what will happen when that connection becomes too close. Love, to them, is a double-edged sword, something they desire and fear all at once. When they start to care about someone, that inner conflict intensifies. They might begin to imagine what it would be like to let someone in fully, but then immediately picture everything that could go wrong. They start to feel emotionally vulnerable, and to an avoidant, vulnerability can feel like handing someone a weapon and hoping they don't use it. So instead of leaning in, they pull back. Not because they're cold, but because their body and mind are trying to protect them from what they believe will be inevitable pain. The irony is, the more they care, the more they retreat. Because the higher the emotional stakes, the greater the fear of loss, betrayal, or engulfment. This is why avoidants tend to trust love that doesn't demand too much from them too quickly. They need to know that they can be cared for without being consumed. That's why people who take things slow, who are emotionally steady, and who don't take distance personally, are often the only ones who can earn an avoidant's trust. It's not love that's the issue, it's everything they believe love will cost them that keeps them running. Avoidants find safety not in intense declarations of love or overwhelming emotional displays, but in consistency. It's the steady presence, the predictable patterns, and the quiet reliability that slowly allow them to lower their defenses. Intensity might feel exciting to some, but for avoidants, it can feel like a trap. Sudden emotional closeness, frequent check-ins, and rapid relationship escalations often activate their internal alarms. They may interpret those things as pressure, intrusion, or even a signal that the other person is emotionally unstable. This doesn't mean they don't appreciate emotional depth or romantic gestures, but they need them in doses that don't flood their nervous system. Intensity often feels chaotic, and chaos is something they've likely spent years trying to avoid. Consistency, on the other hand, brings a sense of control. When someone shows up in a steady, emotionally mature way without mood swings, emotional outbursts, or unpredictability, it sends a message to the avoidant nervous system. This is safe. Over time, this consistent behavior helps them relax. They begin to realize that closeness doesn't always have to result in loss, that being emotionally available doesn't mean losing their independence, and that they can exist in a relationship without being consumed by it. This kind of stability doesn't just help them trust the relationship, it helps them begin to trust themselves in the relationship. Consistency isn't about being perfect, it's about being reliable. It's about doing what you say you'll do. It's about being emotionally grounded, even when they're distant. It's not texting them constantly or forcing them to communicate every single day. It's being emotionally available when they reach out, and remaining non-reactive when they pull away. It's the calm energy you hold in the background that tells them, I'm not going to chase you, but I'm not disappearing either. That emotional consistency builds a bridge between their fear and their desire for connection. Avoidants struggle to open up when the other person is unpredictable or intense because it mirrors the emotional volatility they may have experienced in their past. Maybe they grew up with a caregiver who smothered them emotionally and then withdrew love as punishment. Or maybe they had a partner who pushed hard for closeness and then used their vulnerability against them. Either way, their internal narrative has become, love is a setup, so keep your guard up. That's why emotional intensity, even when it's well-intentioned, often causes them to shut down. They're not trying to push people away, they're trying to survive what they believe is coming next. By being consistent emotionally, mentally, and energetically, you become someone they can start to predict. And predictability equals safety. You're no longer a threat to their independence or peace of mind. You become the one thing they've rarely experienced in love, someone who stays the same, even when they don't. And that quiet, calm consistency begins to do something powerful. It rewires the way they experience love, one steady moment at a time. Avoidants open up not when someone pushes harder, but when that person stops chasing and starts grounding themselves. The natural instinct when you feel someone pulling away is to pursue them, to close the gap, to seek reassurance. But that instinct, while understandable, often backfires with someone who is avoidantly attached. The more they feel you pursuing them, the more they feel cornered or emotionally suffocated. It's not that they don't care, in fact, their pulling away can often be a sign that they care too much and don't know how to regulate the intensity of their feelings. So they retreat to regain emotional control and safety. Chasing them in that moment only amplifies their fear that love means losing themselves. The way in is through calm, grounded presence. When you stop chasing and instead root yourself in emotional stability, it sends a completely different message. It says, I'm here and I respect your space. That doesn't mean going cold or shutting down, it means maintaining connection without pressure. It means letting them come to you when they're ready, knowing that the space you're giving isn't distance in the relationship, but breathing room for their nervous system to settle. This approach doesn't feel instinctual to many people, especially those with anxious tendencies, because it goes against everything they feel in the moment. But avoidants need space to feel their own feelings clearly, without being influenced by another person's emotional expectations. If they sense that you need constant validation or closeness to feel secure, they start to pull back. Not because they want to hurt you, but because their system sees that dynamic as a threat to their autonomy. The only way they'll start to come closer is if they sense that you are secure in yourself, that your love isn't a demand. It's a choice you're offering without condition. When you are grounded, you create the emotional atmosphere they never had growing up, one where feelings are allowed, space is honored, and connection doesn't come at the cost of freedom. That emotional grounding becomes the invisible foundation of trust. They start to realize that you won't punish them for needing space, that you won't try to manipulate them into closeness, that your affection remains steady whether they are near or far. And slowly, the fear that intimacy will trap them begins to fade. What's remarkable is that once avoidants sense this kind of grounded love, they often start to initiate connection on their own. They test the waters, they come back slowly. They may not verbalize it, but they begin to trust that they won't be consumed, controlled, or emotionally overwhelmed by you. That trust doesn't happen through force, it happens through presence, through stillness, through being the calm in the storm, not the wind that tries to blow their walls down. And in that calm, quiet space, avoidants start to do something powerful. They begin to approach. Not because you chased them, but because you became safe enough for them to come home to. Avoidants are often misunderstood when it comes to boundaries. To many people, it seems like they're putting up walls to keep others out, to avoid intimacy, to maintain distance at all costs. But what's often missed is that healthy boundaries are exactly what help avoidants feel safe enough to come closer. It's not boundaries that push them away, it's the lack of them that feels threatening. Avoidants thrive in environments where their autonomy is respected, where there are clear emotional lines, and where no one is trying to merge identities or force premature closeness. Boundaries, when set with clarity and respect, are not barriers, they are bridges to trust. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, boundaries feel like breathing room. They've often experienced love as a space where they had to compromise themselves, hide their true feelings, or give more than they were ready to. So they protect their independence fiercely. But when someone comes into their life and demonstrates healthy boundaries, not just in respecting the avoidance space, but also in holding space for themselves, that's when things begin to shift. Suddenly, the avoidant doesn't feel the pressure to perform or give more than they can. They don't feel cornered into closeness or obligated to express emotions they aren't ready to share. Instead, they experience the relationship as a safe container, one that allows connection without the loss of self. Avoidants watch how others manage boundaries, especially in emotionally charged moments. If someone respects their silence without withdrawing love, or honors their need for space without interpreting it as rejection, that behavior builds trust. It sends the message that love doesn't have to mean invasion. That emotional needs can exist without becoming demands. And that is a radically different experience than the kind of emotional entanglement avoidants often fear. What's also essential is that the person in the relationship with the avoidant maintains their own boundaries. Avoidants don't respect people who overextend themselves, abandon their values for the sake of closeness, or become emotionally chaotic in pursuit of connection. That kind of energy only confirms their belief that closeness leads to enmeshment or emotional instability. But when someone says, "This is what I need to," or "Here's where I end and you begin," it becomes grounding. It teaches the avoidant that love can be two whole people meeting in the middle, not one person dissolving into the other. Boundaries create a rhythm, a pace, a structure, and avoidants need structure in relationships. It helps them understand what's expected of them, what's safe, and how much of themselves they can offer without overextending. It gives them the freedom to lean in slowly, without fear of being swallowed up. When they encounter someone who doesn't take their space personally, who respects their emotional pacing, and who also stands firm in their own emotional needs, that's when they start to trust. Not because the walls are torn down, but because the relationship no longer feels like a threat to their identity. Boundaries, when handled with maturity, don't push the avoidant away, they invite them into a new experience of connection where both people can remain whole. Avoidants are often labeled as emotionally distant, hard to reach, or uninterested in connection. But what many people fail to see is how deeply they long to be understood. What they truly want is to feel seen not just for their behaviors or coping mechanisms, but for who they are beneath the surface. The only kind of love they will ever trust is the one that says, "I see you, even when you hide." This kind of love doesn't chase after them with desperation or panic when they withdraw. It doesn't interpret their silence as punishment or their need for solitude as rejection. Instead, it recognizes the protective layers they've built and says, "I get why you're doing this, and I'm still here." To love an avoidant means understanding that retreat is their reflex. It's how they've coped with emotional overload for most of their lives. But behind that retreat, there's often a hidden wish that someone might actually stay, not physically in their space, but emotionally available without pressure. That someone might understand that their withdrawal isn't indifference but a cry for safety. So when love shows up without demands, when it stays steady even when they pull away, they begin to question their old beliefs. They start to wonder, maybe for the first time, if this love is different. Being that kind of presence requires emotional maturity. It means regulating your own reactions instead of taking their distance personally. It means not trying to force conversations when they're not ready, and not collapsing into your own fears when they become quiet or unavailable. It's about showing them, not telling them, that your connection doesn't require them to be constantly open, expressive, or emotionally fluent. You're offering a kind of love that exists even in silence, that holds space without needing to fill it, that sees value even when affection isn't easily shown. This kind of emotional steadiness becomes a powerful force in their life. It begins to chip away at their inner narrative that love is unsafe, unreliable, or conditional. When they see that your care doesn't vanish when they hide, that your presence doesn't come with guilt, and that your connection doesn't depend on their performance, it builds trust. Slowly, sometimes so subtly it's easy to miss, they begin to test closeness, a longer text, a vulnerable sentence, a look that holds just a bit more depth. These small moments are massive milestones for avoidants, and they often occur only when they feel emotionally witnessed, not judged. Avoidants trust love that allows them to be complex, guarded, and even contradictory at times. They trust the love that doesn't try to fix or rescue them, but simply says, "You're allowed to be exactly as you are, and I'm not going anywhere because of it." That's the kind of love that becomes a sanctuary for someone who has spent a lifetime trying to protect themselves from being too exposed. When love meets them with this quiet, unshakable understanding, it gives them something they never thought they could have permission to stay, even in their most hidden moments. So if you've ever loved an avoidant or asterisk one yourself, remember this: love doesn't have to be loud, intense, or overwhelming to be real. The kind of love an avoidant will ever truly trust is steady, respectful, and calm, the kind that offers space without judgment and presence without pressure. That's not weakness, that's strength. Thank you for being here, for listening with an open heart, and for doing the hard work of understanding love in all its quiet, complicated forms.